Now we're going to take a look at the new stuff that's been added to the material editor in View 6. So let's go ahead and load in we just have a sphere right here, and let's go into the material editor for it. So we're going to double click on this preview right here. And now we can see that we're in the advanced material editor before. This is our basic, but we're going to go into the advanced material editor. So if it looks like this, which it should by default the first time you open the program, but if you're used to working in the advanced material editor, then it will automatically become the default for this to open. But where we used to have two saved materials, we now have our layers panel. And with this layers panel, we can blend together different types of objects and adjust their overall opacity, or alpha, to the other materials. So let's go ahead and load something in. I'll double click on our default surface right now, and I'm just going to load in our sand from under rocks and click OK. Now I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to select our brown rock and click OK. Now keep in mind, the reason I've selected these is because these are simple materials. They are not mixed materials. Because if we're going to be adding layers like this, we need to be using simple and not mixed materials. Although we can add other mixed materials on top of this section, but not where this tree is coming off of. So now if we take a look at the brown rock, we can see we have an alpha boost, which means we can either increase or decrease the amount of the influence of that texture. So if I just bring it around 25%, we will see, 24, that we have a little bit of the sand showing through and a little bit of the brown rock, because at 50%, most of our texture is actually, or what's actually considered to be 0% right here, is when our full texture is in view. But we can either go up 100% or negative 100%. So around 50 or 25, we should see a blend equally between the two. What we could also do is go ahead and adjust that color of that sand to match it a little bit more if we wanted to, or add another layer. So now I'm going to add the paths and sand layer and click OK. So now we have a whole nother layer on top, and we can adjust this one accordingly. So if we want to have only a little bit of influence of this texture in there, we can just drag it down just a tiny bit, and you won't see it really show up as much. We can also still adjust our brown rock and our sand. And if we take a look to the right of each of our surfaces, we can see we have these little markers. And these give us the ability to adjust our color, mainly for previewing exactly where our material is at. So if I clicked for our brown rock, and we clicked on that, we can see we get sort of a pinkish color right now. If I right mouse click, it'll give us the ability to choose which color we'd like to use. So I'm going to change that to more of a blue. And now if we take a look in the preview, we can see sort of a bluish tint on our material. And what that's showing is the amount of influence that we have for this material by displaying it as blue and showing exactly where it's at. So we can do this for any of our materials. If I change our paths in the sand to something more of a green, we can see the total influence of that material, which is extremely green right now. And we can also mix the two together, so now we see sort of a blend between them. And you can do this with any of your materials. And it of course works a little bit better with some other surfaces where we might have a little more even distribution, or with a mixed material where we have actual separate parts of the surface being controlled by different materials. And that way you can pick out exactly where each of those materials is, and you don't have to worry about guessing is that this material or is that material. This way you can separate it by a color and just take a look and really see what it is that you are affecting. If we also take a look, we can make this into a mixed material by selecting the top brown rock, select mixed material, and now it's going to add a whole other section to our tree. We have our major on top, paths and sand, where we can adjust the influence of environment between the mixed material, but also we can add additional layers to this material. So let's go ahead and load something in. We'll load in the orange rock, and we could also add a layer to that as well. So we could do aggregated, and then that's also going to blend together with that. So we can adjust how we want these two textures and these two materials to blend together, and then overall we can adjust how the two blend together overall. So I'm going to load in a distribution here, just double click, and I'm going to select clumps from spots and click OK. And now we can see a blend between the two materials showing through. And we could also adjust this overall texture down just a little bit more and expand that if we want to by showing the whole list of layers. And then if we need to, we can also lower these up and down. So if I have the sand, and let's say I want the sand to be on top of the brown rock, I can click up, and that moves the sand above the brown rock. And I can click up even higher again, down, and down below. And you can move these around and, like I said, turn them on and off. So it's a very cool new tool, the ability to actually work with layers and blend all of these different types of materials together. And like I said, we can adjust the distribution, we can edit a filter, make the other object come through a little bit more, the other texture, and it's just very, very cool. So you can go ahead and save these out, store them if you want to in the side, and just play around with them. We can still use our mixing proportions, material 1 through 2, and the new layers panel is just very, very neat. If we take a look, another look at the top up here, we notice under Effects that we have Indirect Lighting up here now, which is now directly part of our Advanced Material Editor, and it's a new option for each of our materials. We also have only shadows, so we can display only the shadows, which is really neat. So lots of new stuff up in the top down here, and the next chapter is going to be going through translucency and subsurface scattering and all the other new features available in the material editor.